Riots and government failure. That is going to be the topic of tonight's video. So, don't forget to smash the like button and smash the subscribe button. Smash all the buttons, okay? Anyhow, I want to share with you my thoughts on what's going on with the riot tourism industry known as Antifa and Black Lives Matter. In spite of the universal condemnation of the death of George Floyd, murdered by the hands of a police officer who has now been charged with, I believe, third-degree murder and manslaughter. That's the charge. Not convicted yet. We still, once, the court of public opinion is not sufficient. Okay, this man is entitled to due process under the Constitution, of which I am a fan, and which we will be talking about a little later on. So, before we get started, I want to play something for you that's going to lead into my discussion about government failure and riots. And this is from a podcast I listen to called Garage Logic. Now, Garage Logic is hosted on the Podcast One Radio Network. They don't sponsor me in any way. The host is Joe Souchere. He had a show by the same name on AM 1500 in Minneapolis that I used to listen to more than 20 years ago, and was pleased to hear that they had a podcast, because I haven't listened to them since I moved out of Minneapolis, except for when I've been there to visit. So, Garage Logic is based out of the Twin Cities, and they often talk about current Minnesota events. They talk about a lot of stuff, and it's a great podcast. But I want to play for you an email that Joe Souchere received from the host of the show. Joe Souchere received from a Minneapolis police officer from the 3rd Precinct, which is, of course, the precinct that serves downtown Minneapolis where George Floyd was murdered. Please listen.
I have a email from a Minneapolis police officer. I have no reason to believe that he's not. He provides his name. He provides his name. I'm not going to.
Thank you.
Hail you, Mayor.
Hail.
Hail. What the hell?
Mayor Fry, the City Council, and the Minneapolis Police Chief's administration has lied to the citizens of Minneapolis and the state. Mayor Fry had planned to allow the protesters to take over the 3rd Precinct since the evening of Wednesday, May 27. Officers were informed to remove all equipment and personal items from their lockers and offices. Since then, officers have removed all of their property from the precincts because they believe their workplace will be next. Their plan was to allow them to take the precinct because that was what the protesters wanted, and their thinking was if they allowed them to have it, they would stop protesting and be done. As if they were thinking the protesters would say to themselves while watching it burn, well, we did what we came here to do. It looks like we should go home now. If you watch the link I have attached at the bottom, I did. You will see that all items that were able to be removed prior to Thursday night were removed. In the video, you see walls empty, office equipment, and computers are nowhere to be found. When the whole Twin Cities was ablaze last night was not just something that had occurred. Allowing this to happen dates back years when Bicycle Betsy ran the city. She allowed people to demonstrate and protest without any pre-approval or any permits. She allowed them to block streets and light rail with no repercussions. Protesters have since been allowed at any time or day to just walk around, mostly in downtown, and have the police escort them, not having any care for anyone else's workday or travel to downtown events. It all falls back on the old saying, give them an inch and they will take a mile. P.S. Do you think Reavers can go without a Grunhofer's?
All right, so then they get into a sponsorship thing there. So, Mayor Fry, the mayor of Minneapolis, who is a complete joke as a government official and as a human being, decided to empty the 3rd Precinct police building of all staff, personnel, and anything of value. They emptied out the computers, they took all the pictures off the walls, they took all the equipment out of there and said, let them burn it. That's what they want, and that will appease them. Appeasement doesn't work, never has, doesn't work in wartime, doesn't work in peacetime. The doctrine of appeasement is a joke, and that's what this fool, if he had any sense of history, would have known. But I want to talk about the failure of government here, because this is the point. Government fails. Government fails. Government fails at the things it's supposed to do and doesn't. Okay? The government here had a job to protect the property and citizens of the city of Minneapolis. If they had known that 3rd Precinct was going to be a target, they could have, put in barricades, put out personnel. Instead, what they did was they sent, probably 100 police officers to the murderer's house to protect him. Now, here's another failure of government, is that there is a double standard for police and for the population. Had you and I been arrested for murder, they wouldn't send us home and wait a couple of days for the investigation to settle things out and charge. We would be in a jail cell. We'd be in a jail cell, and we would be waiting to talk to a lawyer and be given one phone call. Okay, but not police. Not police. The police get to go home and have police protection until they can get their story straight and figure out what they're going to charge the officer with. The guilty officer. Well, let's not say guilty. Let's not say guilty yet. Because, again, I believe in due process. But this is government corruption. And this is the same thing we saw with Ahmaud Arbery in Ohio, right? This former police officer, there were all these conflicts of interest between the police, him being a former police officer, and the prosecutor's offices. Like, these are two separate branches of government here. Police are under the executive, prosecutors are under the legislative branch, and they're supposed to be a check and balance in power, but instead what you have is corruption. The government is corrupt. And when the government has a job to do, like we see in this case, the government usually fails, and yet you trust them. And then when the government tries to do things outside of its purview, such as trying to prevent a global pandemic by shutting down business, killing an economy, and destroying lives and livelihoods, it fails at that also. 100,000 people have died of COVID-19. And by the way, we can safely say now that the threat of COVID-19 is over. It's done. It's finished. I made a video about a week, or maybe not even a week ago, about how the government, the ruling class, let's call them, the ruling class want us fighting one another. That's what these protests are. These are vacation rioters. This isn't local people in Minneapolis or in any other city burning down their own resources. In fact, when you see interviews with people who are local, they're like, why would I burn down the places where I do business and the places that I depend on? They're angry about this. And you should be angry too. Because the government has failed. And yet you trust them. Why? Why do we trust the government to, they give us a bribe of $1,200 stimulus and they're trying to buy our votes? Why? Did you know that the second paragraph of the Declaration of Independence tells us when the government fails in providing life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that we can abolish or replace the government. Abolish or replace. All right? That might be what it's time for. In the 1530s, a man named Martin Luther rose up in the church and saw the corruption of the Church Universal, the Roman Catholic Church, and he wanted to reform it. Martin Luther had no intention of abolishing the Roman Catholic Church. He wanted to bring it back to Scripture. And there was a saying in the Reformation, ad fontes, back to the sources. Ad fontes, to the sources. And that's what America needs. America needs a reformation. Ad fontes, to the sources. What are our sources? It is the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and the Declaration of Independence. Okay? I see a lot of stuff online with people saying, F America, I hate America, injustice, inequality, and guess what? I agree. I am with you. But here's the thing, if we go back to the founding principles upon which America is built, the Constitution, it solves all of those problems. It solves all of the problems. But the problem is to go back to that We need a reformation, just as the Roman Catholic Church could not have been further from Scripture. You know, they had their doctrine, sola ecclesia, that the church was the ultimate final authority. The church universal, the papacy, right? And Martin Luther said no to the sources, ad fontes, to the Scripture, sola scriptura, Scripture alone. We need something similar like that. We need a similar movement in this country to bring reformation back to the sources, the Constitution. And it requires an overthrow of the government. How do we do that? Are we talking violence? My prayer is that it wouldn't come to that. I am a New Testament pacifist. I believe that the teachings of Jesus are very clear, on pacifism. The book of Revelation warns when Jerusalem is being sacked, get out. It didn't say to stand and fight. No. So I would say we need to vote, and what people need to do is raise up the people around them who will submit to the authority of the Constitution. Because there are popes. There are popes in our state houses. There are popes in our mayor's office. There are popes in our sheriff's departments. There are popes as the chiefs of police. And for many of you, there's a pope in the White House. Listen, I'm not an orange man bad guy, but I'm not an orange man as infallible either. Orange Man makes lots of mistakes. Orange Man's done a lot more good than I ever thought he would, because I thought in 2016 it was a joke that anyone would vote for a New York liberal veiled as a Republican. And I'm thankful that he's governed as conservatively as he has. But he is not the Pope. He is not the final governing authority. Okay? Ad fontes. To the sources. To the Constitution. If you want to heal this country, we need to stop listening to the ruling class, stop allowing the ruling class to play us like little marionettes. They are the puppet masters. We need to cut the strings and recognize the freedom that we have under the Constitution and get back to it. Think of all the government regulation in our lives. I'm going to close with this, guys. I've talked to a lot of business owners with the COVID-19 thing, and hey, why don't you open? Why don't you defy these orders? You know they're unconstitutional. Well, they'll take my liquor license. They'll take my license to cut hair. Have you considered why you need that license? Why does the government have to have their hand out for your license to sell liquor and buy liquor from a distributor and to cut somebody's hair? It's time, guys. It is time to throw out the ruling class, that we come together. And tell you what, the ruling class, you do want to talk about where there's puppet strings. It is with Black Lives Matter, and it is with Antifa. And the puppet master is George Soros. This isn't rocket science, guys. We need to stand against this, united. There is universal condemnation for the murder of George Floyd. Universal. You look far and wide, you don't see anybody defending this police officer. Anywhere. On social media, on YouTube, on any platform, anywhere. You don't see it. It doesn't exist. So why the riots? To keep us divided. So that we, white people, will say, well, there go those black people again. Confirming all the stereotypes against them. Why do they do this to themselves? And so that blacks will look at us white people and say, there they go condemning us again. We're being hunted. And all of these other things that are said about the police and things like that. Like, dude, this is not a black versus white issue. This is a ruling class versus citizen issue. And we better get that straight. Because they've got us divided, and we're this close to being conquered. So again, that's all I got tonight. Don't forget to smash the like button. Don't forget to sit on the subscribe button or whatever it is you're supposed to do with it these days. Thanks for watching.